Good morning. It's Daniel, your host of Because Growth Matters, the podcast for sales leaders who want to change the way they lead, manage, mentor their sales teams, all talking about getting more productivity and getting more results. Today, you're in for a treat. We are not interviewing your typical suit-wearing, spreadsheet-slinging exec. Nope. He is a man who's taken the boardroom and turned it upside down. A roadie, a music lover, a fantasy reader, a games player, and someone who I think you might be allergic to PowerPoint. The founder of Missing Link, a company that's helped thousands of people go from blur to some people you want to listen to. He is rather direct. He is a little bit like a Harley, loud but not dangerous, and built for comfort, not for speed. Richard Mulholland, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. And in the spirit of being direct, I love PowerPoint. Blaming PowerPoint for a bad presentation is like blaming a pan for a shit meal. It is not PowerPoint's problem, it's your problem. Like, the tool is brilliant. It's the use of the tool that's so bad. So now that we've set the level,
There we go. Richard, for the folks that don't know you, and they must have been living under a rock, you have spent your life changing the way people perceive presentations and how they present, which bleeds into sales. How did you get there from being a roadie? Or what did being a roadie teach you about? And if you don't know what a roadie is, go and look it up. We're not going to explain it for you now. You make famous people look good. How did it naturally bleed into this profession that you're in now?
So the first thing is, I was a lighting designer, and I very quickly realized that the presentation of something isn't a small part of it. If you have a singer just standing, the effect that the lights make are huge. I remember a story, and I don't normally go into this, but I was on tour with UB40, and the wind was really, really pumping in, I think it was Port Elizabeth or Cape Town. And there was a big scrim. That's the thing that appears in front of the stage. And we had to bring it down because we were worried that the scrim would blow over onto the audience and people would think the stage was falling down and panic and it'd be a mob. So my boss said to me, quickly run up. So we climbed up to the top of the scaffolding, right at the top of the tower. And we took out a knife and we cut off the top of the scrim so the aluminum pole could just drop it straight down. We would lower it with rope. But I was stupid and I held onto the pole and I cut. So when the wind picked up, it actually blew me most of the way off the scaffolding. So now my feet were on the scaffolding, but I was hanging out over the audience, holding on to the thing that we just cut. And my boss, Tim, he grabbed the pole and he pulled me back in. And it was hectic. And I'm standing there looking at him, and immediately you could see tears. I was like 19 years old. You could see the tears rolling down. And he said to me, don't worry. It's a stupid mistake. You'll never make it again. And he said to me, what is your show called? And I said, I'm on follow spots. He said, I'm going to get somebody else to do it. And I thought I was being punished. And he said, meet me at the dimmer racks. So the dimmer racks are just off stage right. It's just kind of behind. You can't really see it. And as they were playing, he said, okay, come with me. And he walked me out in front of where the scrim was that we had been lowering. And so we're on the stage and we sit down in front and the band is performing just over to us and we're waiting. And all of a sudden, the Molfe came on. That's the big audience blinding lights. You know those lights that they pump out at the audience? And so those Molfe came on and they boosted out the audience. And the audience was like, yeah. And my boss, Tim, he put his arm around me and he said, this is why we do it. This is the reaction. This is the effect that it has. And I understood in that moment that there's so much more to an event than simply, showing up and doing what has to be done. There's a whole bunch of other elements that all add to make it better. And when we started doing conference work, we realized that people just weren't getting that. At first, we thought, okay, I could make their events better by fixing the lighting. But then I realized, okay, well, we've solved the one part of it. So we've now brought the rock and roll, the lighting and things to corporate events. But they were missing that center, that center vocalist, that performance in the middle. If the speaker was bad, that would be like having a bad singer at a rock show. So we're only important if the core stuff is good. And I realized that I was a cure for the wrong disease. You have to fix the presentation, the speaker, before you fix everything that went around it. So at 22, I broke away. I started Missing Link, and our job was to try and fix that, to turn corporate presenters into center vocalists, and to let them understand that they carry the story. We're just there to support it.
Rich, I think you know me by now. I suffer from LSD like no one else, lead singer disease, but sometimes I can't keep the notes. What would you say are the 3 top tips for someone presenting that they can take away that's never going to go onto Missing Link's website? What are the 3 things we can do just to be better?
So the first thing, and this is unfortunately on the website, but I don't want to skip it because it's so important, is that a good presentation, you earn your applause in the writing room, not on the stage. If your talk is applause worthy, it doesn't come down to your performance, right? It comes down to what you've put in. So if we stick with the singer analogy, if the songs are not good, it doesn't matter about the vocal range of the performer, right? So, and a lot of people think, oh, but I'm a good speaker, I'll just show up and throw up. But it's not the skill that matters, it's the system. So have a narrative structure before you get on stage. Take the time beforehand to write something worthwhile. The second thing, and this is slightly more difficult, but practice when the stakes are low. We actually created Atomic Talks. It's basically we turned business books into small little 10-minute talks that any individual can present to their company, and it's totally free. And we did that because we found that so many leaders were waiting until the stakes were high to learn how to present. So the way that most people treat presentations would be akin to a band never practicing, to writing a song, kind of going through it a couple of times by themselves, and then waiting till they get onto stage and then to present it once and then to do away with the song and never sing it again. Or a Olympic athlete not competing at small regional events and then only presenting once at the Olympics or running once at the Olympics. But that is how people treat speaking. And the stakes of giving, when you're invited to go and speak somewhere, the stakes are fundamentally higher than you think they are. Because this is the opportunity for you to set yourselves apart from everybody else. And most people understand that the acceptable standard for speaking is so low that you actually don't have to try hard. But what they don't realize is the people who try harder win. So that's number 2. And then number 3, and this is a little bit technical, but nail your segues. It seems like such a small thing, but it's the first thing we teach all the professional speakers we work with on Story to Stage. If you can transition smoothly from slide 1 to slide 2 without looking back, seeing where you're at and taking your cue for the slide. So the slide must always follow the speaker must never follow the slide. And what I mean by that is if I'm saying, all right, blah, 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 finish a topic, click, glance. Okay. Now I want to talk to you about, derivatives. Well, then I'm following the slide. But what I want to turn around and say, so that brings us to the end of this. But of course, this begs a question. And the question is, how does that impact in derivatives? Well, I'll tell you, my friends, click. What it does is and then we bring it in there. So that making sure that your slides always follow you and you never follow your slides, I promise you, that is the first thing you notice from professional speakers to amateurs.
Totally. And I think you even might have, or one of your team commented when I was at a Vegas show. And now I was at a conference and everybody was staring at the prompter in front of them and not looking up at the audience. And you could see
that was me.
readings.
I remember that. Yeah.
It drives me beyond. Why do we think it's acceptable, especially in the sales area, that reading slides is okay? Why is the bar of excellence set so low, in your own words?
Okay, so first of all, reading slides is absolutely okay. In fact, reading slides is imperative. But, and there's a massive but, if you may read the few important words on your slide to set a premise. So for example, if I'm showing a quote, an Alvin Toffler quote, I might say, I click over to the slide. As Alvin Toffler says, click, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now my audience is going to read that whether I speak or not. What's the point of me saying something else if something else is written on the slide? So rule number 1 is if it's on the screen, you must read it. Rule number 2 is stop putting so much on a screen because then your audience would rather read. It's not a document, it's a deck. Now there are sometimes we recognize that kind of a talk versus a presentation, that if I'm doing a sales presentation, I might actually be taking a client through a relatively rigorous process that may as well have been a document that I could sit and go through with them that I happen to be projecting. And I understand that there are certain cases. If you are on a big stage speaking to many, many people, that is never the case. It's just lazy slide building and lazy presenting. And so what we're doing is we're saying, I don't want to have to bother learning anything. So what I'm going to do is to put everything on the screen. Now, let me tell you what the downside of that is. The downside of that would be if I was in a sales environment, okay, and I have a slide that has everything on it, but the client has just said something 2 seconds earlier that actually makes me want to go slightly in a different direction, which we all know happens in every sales meeting we're in. If I built a slide that has every single bit of information, I have no freedom to move. But if I built a slide that illustrates just the core principles that I can then talk to, then I can say, okay, so for us, it's about get, keep, and grow. But let me explain to you what that means relative to what we were talking about. Remember when you said that client said this? Well, what we do is that. And so if you put all the information on there, you can't do that. So read your slides, but make sure that you're not reading them for longer than, if you're taking more than 10 seconds to read everything on your slide, with slight exceptions. I've got one very long passage from Socrates that takes me about 15 seconds to read, but it's important. And so I read it. But if you're not doing that, then by all means, take the text off. And by the way, Daniel, importantly, the only reason that I kept the copy on that slide is I recognize that it's a very photograph-worthy slide. So it's important content, and you see people's phones come up and they want to take a photo of it. In that instance, you want it to be complete. A slide that just has a pretty picture on it and only one weird word, no one's going to take a photo of that, and you have no artifacts left on people's phones and social media afterwards.
Rich,
but there's another point which we can maybe get to. I'll hang it up if you're interested. And that's about looking at the comfort monitor and the usage of that. But we can decide to come back to that if you want.
That was what I was talking about. The comfort monitor is that seeing people speak to that comfort monitor more than speaking to me doesn't move my needle very much. It really puts me in quite a bad mood, actually, because I'm there to listen to you, not to watch you read, in my opinion.
It's the same reason why I don't enjoy panel discussions generally, because I feel like I'm watching somebody else's conversation. So if I'm watching a panel discussion and people aren't looking at me, when I host panel discussions, I always say to the panelists, I say to them, guys, I'm going to ask you a question, and if you start speaking to me, I'm going to look away from you and I'm going to look at the audience. I'm not being rude. I'm just reminding you where you're supposed to be looking. I'm asking a question, you're answering for them. And it's the same thing. The audience wants to feel spoken to. They don't want to feel disassociated. Now, the job of a comfort monitor, this is actually a problem that goes down to lazy technicians. It actually requires quite an extra step. So I want you to imagine, and we're going to get a little bit technical here, but I'll explain to you why that is. So when you output, if you imagine you output your screen from your laptop to a big screen. On your laptop, it shows presenter view, and on the big screen, the output screen, it just shows a full screen slide. Now, most technicians have never bothered presenting on a stage. So what they do is they beam the full screen slide to the comfort monitor. Now, as a speaker, this is completely useless to me. I don't need to see my current slide in front of me. The only thing I need from my comfort monitor is to be able to glance at any moment in time to say, where am I going next? Because I want to lead in my segue. I want to have that ability to lead my slide. And the only way I can do that is being 100% sure of where I'm going next. So what I do is I just glance at the comfort monitor. But you should not be spending if you're spending more than a second on your comfort monitor, it's too long. Even if you want to read the slide, don't read the comfort monitor. Actually, turn around and say, as this great quote shows, let's look at what Socrates says about this. And then you can read it with them for a brief second. I mean, if you're doing that the whole time, that's horrible. But if you read it with them for a brief second to illustrate the point, and then you turn around and say, you see what I mean? And then you come back and you present it, then that's okay. But if you're looking for just a comfort monitor, you're not even staring at there's no shared space because you're not even looking at what they're looking at. So it's complete disassociation. I believe comfort monitors should be actually projectors that are at the back of the room. So even if I'm looking at them, I'm actually looking at the back of the audience, and they don't see it because it's behind them. But again, lazy technicians.
I actually went to a church in Johannesburg and I was watching an amazing band, and I turned around and they had that. So clearly their engineers are doing their business. Rich, but we are chatting about people who very seldom get to stand on stages like you do. We sell like this quite often in today's society. What's one tip to being better on a medium like this, using Teams, Zoom, social media, from a presentation, a sales presentation perspective, a pitch perspective?
Okay. So taking control of the meeting is one of the most important things. We actually have an online presentation masterclass that we quite big on. Maybe we can prepare like a promo code for your listeners or something if they want to do it. But the one big thing with online meetings is people don't take control. They don't do the structure well. I believe that in a traditional meeting, the ratio is generally 2/3. And what I mean by that is if I'm invited to present for a 60-minute meeting, at a bank in a boardroom, I might spend 40 minutes presenting and then 20 minutes doing Q&A. And that's the kind of acceptable norm if I'm showing up to do a presentation to a group. But online, we change that. Online, that would be in a 30-minute meeting, I would spend 10 minutes presenting. The first 10 minutes are asking questions, ask, listen, diagnose, prescribe. The next 10 minutes are saying, okay, now we're on the same page. Let me explain to you. And I'm not doing any kind of, this is who we are, this is what we do, send that shit before, right? What I'm doing is simply saying, okay, you know that problem that we were talking about? Here's how we solve it. It could be a case study. It could be a thing. You spend 10 minutes going through it, and then the final 10 minutes are answering questions. And that's what it is. And the format that we do, and I'll take you through it, but I always start a call, and I recognize that no one's taking control of sales meetings. So I simply say, hey, everyone, thanks so much. I know, we just got 30 minutes to get through this, so I thought I would offer a structure that generally works well for us. What I'd like to do is going to start by asking you some questions for 10 minutes. Then, if it makes sense, I'm going to explain to you what it is that we do and how we can add value to, what we've just discussed. And finally, I'm going to flip the mic over to you to see what happens. The last thing we're going to do before we close off is we're going to decide if we're going to do business together. How does that sound? And now there's two important things here. The one is that I've set the structure and I've taken control, and people generally like that. And the second thing is that I've planted the seed. I've said, finally, we're going to decide if we're going to do work together. It amazes me how many sales professionals don't set that expectation up front. And then you say to the client, how does that sound? And then they say, that sounds great, 100% of the time. And they will never not say that sounds great, or at least in my experience. And so what happens is now we all agree that the job of this meeting is to decide. And by the way, you might want to say, then we're going to decide if a follow-up meeting is worthwhile, or then we're going to decide if we're going to take this and do a due diligence. You know what I mean by that. But then we're going to decide something. So I plant that expectation, the victory condition up front.
I have to dive in and say to our listeners, if you haven't read Here Be Dragons, Rich goes into lots of detail on this in practical ways. I'm a bit of a fan. It's next to my bed. Love the book and love the way you explain this, because that you just said it now, our victory conditions, start with the victory in mind and move back, is just such gold for salespeople, especially young salespeople, young in the profession, is that we're almost afraid to get to the end. Because what if they don't like us? Or what if we haven't achieved it, but we've never asked what it is? So, Rich, there's a lot there. Thank you. You carry on with that thought.
Well, the last little part of the thought, and by the way, just to young salespeople, this is the job of the future. You are the one that's fired last, right? It's the most important one. We need to stop hiding behind the fact that we're salespeople and start being very, very proud about what we're doing. I promise you, if you're really good at your job, the person you're selling to is going to try to hire you. Everybody wants good salespeople. It's the number one hard thing to find. So be proud about talking about the fact that they know you are. So why are we pretending we're not? And it just does such good psychological work when we've all agreed up front that this is it. After I've said that whole spiel and I say, how does that sound to everybody? They'll all say, that sounds great. And I'll say, okay, but before we start, obviously this is actually me starting, but I almost make it like it's casual. And then I drop what we call the Dragon Hunter question. And if you only take one thing away from today, that's this. Is we turn and say, okay, but before we start, nobody needs another 30-minute Zoom meeting, talking heads in their life today. So I'm curious, why did this feel like the right time for us to have this call? And then you look at them and then they have to answer. And there are two important parts there. First of all, they're going to tell you why they had the call. And secondly, why now? Why is this the right time? And if they don't give you a good enough answer, you push a little bit further. The entire first 10 minutes of the meeting are simply building on that question. Ask, listen, diagnose, prescribe. You're going to just keep on asking. And then, if they'll turn around and say to me, well, we've got this big event coming up. And I'll say, oh, wow, who's going to be there? And then I say, oh, what's at stake? What will happen if you do this well? Like, let's say this entire event is 10% beyond your expectations. And they'll be like, oh, it would be worth, 100 million rand to our business. And I say, oh, and just out of interest, just for fun, if this event fails, what would the impact be outside of that? Could there be a negative? I said, absolutely. We could, we could lose staff, we could lose people. I said, cool, okay. So just to make sense here, that this call we're actually playing for somewhere between retrenching staff and 100 million rand. Is that correct? And they say yes. I said, good. I'm glad we understand the scope of the conversation. So we've anchored the problem at 100 million rand. Now, all of a sudden, when I turn around and say to them, I think it's going to be about 150,000 rand, for them to turn around and say that's too much money, I say, are you joking? Are you kidding? Are we not talking about the same thing here? Or do you not believe that we can make the impact we say we do? Because that's okay, but then I have to prove myself to you. But if you believe we can do it, then 150,000 rand is inconsequential. And they're like, you're right. And we move on from there. And so that's the model.
Rich, I'm going to carry on there because I actually have a personal question to ask about that, about charging to be on stage, but I'm not going to ask you that now. You've always challenged the idea of professionalism. You have a potty mouth every now and then. I haven't seen you in a suit, and you covered in more tattoos than a U magazine. What does professionalism look like and sound like in 2025 from our world perspective?
I think professionalism has always sounded the same. When I started Missing Link, suit and tie every single day. Every single day. I went and got a tailored suit. The only tailored suit I've ever owned. I went, to a little tailor in Four Ways Mall, and I got 2 suits made. I thought I was baller. I spent way more money on it than I could have afforded. And I showed up to meetings every single day. And the problem was, when I showed up, our clients were all banks. When I showed up, and we were quite lucky relatively early on, maybe by the time I was 23, I was dealing with CEOs of banks. The problem was, when I got into the meeting with them, they looked at me like a 23-year-old in a suit to a banker is an intern, right? It looks like a youngster acting as an adult. As soon as I decided to do away with that, I realized they're seeing me all wrong. They're seeing me as one of them, but less. I need to be different to them. So I decided to hell with it. And I started, up until my 30s, I refused to wear long pants to anything. If I went to a wedding, I had zip-on long pants that I would take off halfway through. I lived in shorts, summer, winter, the whole time. So every meeting, and I met with probably the biggest CEOs of all the banks in the country, did lots of work with them. And my professionalism, and the line we would always say to our staff was, guys, we've just removed the safety net. Because we're showing up like this, and this was a time where maybe it wasn't as expected. We didn't have the .com bros with the hoodies. So because it wasn't expected, I said to the guys, we have to be the most professional people in the room. That means we have to be the smartest in our field. We have to promise PM and deliver AM. We have to do everything better and slicker and more professional and know more about our field than they know about theirs. That's the job. Because if we do not, then we're just the potty mouth guys with the tattoos and the skate shorts. But if we do, we're working from a low expectation point, so it's easy to grow. So I used to go and sit in these big board meetings, and it would be myself, let's say it's a big event, and it would be the sponsorship agency and the leading marketing agency and myself, and I was like maybe say 24, and the CEO and the head of sponsorship and all of these things. And at the beginning of the meeting, nobody would look at me. I would speak and they'd kind of listen briefly and glance away. But by the end of the meeting, I was holding court. Because first impressions lie. How people perceive you is the difference between the first impression and the closing impression of that first engagement. So how much you please someone. If you walk into a movie and you've been told this is the most incredible movie ever, and even if it starts brilliantly, or if a band comes on stage and plays their best song first, and then every other song from there is shit, well, then your expectation goes down and you go from a 5 to a 4. So that event was a -1. But I would walk in and people would kind of look at me like, who's this guy? He's a 3 out of 10. We're not even paying him any notice. I didn't have to be that good. If I was just a 7 out of 10, I became the most impressive person in the room, even if there were 9s in the room, because I jumped from a 3 to a 7, whereas they jumped from an 8 to a 9. Their lasting impression was a +1. My lasting impression was a +4. Surprise and delight. And we saw it happen over and over and over again. Now, I'm not suggesting to everybody that this is going to work for you, but I'm saying is you want to be different. You want to be memorable. Memorable is one of the most important assets we have in the world today. And so many people are trying to be forgettable. They're trying to look like everybody else. You want to be the black sheep. When they come herding, culling all the white sheep, you want to be the black sheep.
You know, Rich, you always do this to me, and I'm going on 13 different tangents of thinking. I'm speaking on behalf of the category of sales person now who's between 45 and 55, generally male, losing relevance. What are two tips for them to reignite their energy and reignite and not be overwhelmed by the world and noise of sales now? What would you say? Where do they go to?
Okay, so the first thing is you just have to decide. I turned 50 and I've
Congratulations.
absolutely decided, I've absolutely decided that the best is yet to come. I do not accept when people turn around and say things like, oh, the youth are better equipped. Bullshit. They have access to the same tools as us. But the difference is we have 20 odd years of business experience on top of access to the very same tools they have. Only irrelevance is a decision, right? You wake up every day, and every day, if you decide not to try new things, you decide to revel in your irrelevance. But if you decide that you want to be the leading thinker, like 45, it's nothing. You're so young. There are 20 years of career left in you. There is basically as much career at 45. If you think about it, your career only really got started for a lot of people. 25, we got a rhythm, we got going, we figured things out. You've got as much career in front of you as you have behind you. Don't give up yet. And second of all, don't let these youngsters believe that they have access to nothing. Access to nothing that you do not have access to. The only difference between you and them is they're deciding to look at it. And so that's, it's not, there's no magic trick here. So I did a talk the other day, and what I said to people is that, it was myself and my friend John Sane were the two speakers. And everyone was kind of watching and they were looking at it and they were like oohing and eyeing and taking photos of some of the stuff John was showing. And so he was the opening and I was the closing. So I didn't show the ooh and ah stuff because that had already been done. I was trying to say, what's the mindset we need to get that? Now, I believe there are 3 characteristics we have to have. I'll maybe come to them in a second if you want. But the main point I made to people is the only difference between John and you is John has trained his algorithm better. And so what I mean by that is if you're looking at anything John says, and again, John's done a brilliant job, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, it's actually a compliment. If you are looking at anything that John is showing, technically, if you're oohing and eyeing, that was available to you. The difference is, if you went to your explore page in Instagram, it's showing you photos of cats and memes and funny things. Whereas if you go to John's, it's showing him the latest, greatest thinking around technology and innovation in the future. Now, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be able to relax and look at cats, but I'm saying you've got 2 fundamental tools. Let's say 3. We've got YouTube, we've got Instagram, and we've got TikTok. I personally don't use TikTok, but no judgment. It's one more I don't need. But Instagram is basically ice hockey, cat memes, board games, fidget toys. It's all of my joy stuff. And I just kind of scroll through it and it's very, very silly. Whereas YouTube is highly curated. So I have the stuff that I search for in YouTube is the stuff that adds relevance to my life. So I know that I have one algorithm working for my relevance and I've trained it. And if you start seeing crap come in, you rather go and you move and you stop looking for that on that medium and you look somewhere else. It's the same thing I've done with my Spotify. So I have Spotify and YouTube Premium, YouTube Music. And the reason I have YouTube Music is because I have YouTube Premium to not have the ads and it's free. Now, I like to listen to a lot of punk rock music and trap hop and stuff like this. But then I also love very, very thinky orchestral music. I've trained both algorithms separately. The YouTube music algorithm is only for orchestral music. It's only for Yonsei and for bands like that. And then Ren and Rise Against and Blank 182, they're in Spotify. This sounds silly, but it's the best $10 I've spent on music distillation because I'm able to train my algorithm. But most of us use our algorithms as generalists. Now, I know I'm belaboring this point, Daniel, but I think it's such an important point because once you train that algo, then it does the work for you. The videos it gives you are super cool ones and they'll be the leading sales thinkers, the leading things, and then you're that guy. The secondest thing is to recognize that what worked yesterday won't work tomorrow. Some of the human-centric foundational skills absolutely will, and this is the unfair advantage you have over the 20-year-olds. But we need to do that to the power of the newest technology.
Wow. Yeah, that was good. Really good. Tell me about helping people get over the no and being afraid of rejection. Because, and I'll tell you where it's coming from. At the moment, I'm seeing a lot of salespeople who have been order takers for years. They don't know how to make sales. They don't know how to build relevance and build sales together. And they're terrified of no because they haven't been selling. How do you help people get over that in order to take them forward as salespeople?
Yeah, so you have to start scoring your nose, right? And that's the reality. And this is Colin Chapman. He's a sales guy, worked for us for years. I actually used to work with him. We met him at a sales network. We poached him. He now lives in Germany and does a lot of sales work there. A wonderful, wonderful thinker. Certainly a great guest to get on the show at some stage. He recognized that he was probably going to get about 6 or 7 no's for every yes, even from the same client. So it was going to take 6 or 7 interactions for a client before they actually pulled the trigger. And fundamentally, if it's not yes, it's no. And therefore, he started scoring the no's. So he works under the premise that every no is a win, because if you recognize it, once you figure out your format, I'm going to make 7 calls, and for every 7 calls I make, I will get 1 sale. Well, then you know that, okay, cool. Every single no is 1 step closer. And that has to be your mindset. And so what your job is when you're younger is your job is to try and figure out what the ratio is. What is your win-loss ratio? And the only way you do that is by recording, right? What's measured is mastered. So you're going to go through there and you're going to measure, okay, generally win, no, win, maybe, no, 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 maybe. Okay, cool. On repeat. And then you start saying, and you drop that into ChatGPT and say, what's my win-loss ratio? And then you say that. And then every single day, you know that you've got to work through your 6 no's in order to get your 1 yes. And then you know that you can reach out to the maybes again later, and then you know what you're doing from there. But if you're scared of that, you'll lose. And if you are scared of that, sales might not be for you. The one way you can get better at it, and I was taught this in a negotiations skills training course we did, and it was very, very simple. You have to go to McDonald's and ask them to supersize you for free. And then when you go to Seattle afterwards or Vida, you got to ask them for an extra shot for free. And the funny thing is so we had to do that 10 times. I got 2 free shots, no free upgrades from McDonald's, but it didn't hurt. It did not hurt. Now, in social media sharing, there's a concept, and I can't remember the lady's name, but if you search her, she's a TikToker. She has this concept she refers to as Cringe Mountain. And she says, you have to learn to climb Cringe Mountain. Now, in content creation, I'll tie back to sales. In content creation, that means putting content out on LinkedIn that I've already put out before just because it performs well. And 1 or 2 people might remember it. And I'm like so embarrassed. Oh my goodness, Daniel's probably seen this before. Oh, he's going to judge me because I'm trying to self-promote. Daniel knows I'm trying to self-promote. What does he think I'm doing it for? Charity. So he's not going to, the people who like you aren't going to mind. Some trolls might not like it, but so what? If they engage, that's good. And the idea is you have to get over Cringe Mountain. And at the other side of Cringe Mountain is the land of cool. And what this content creator said is that what she realized very, very quickly is the people who are giving you crap for climbing up Cringe Mountain, they're not at the top of the mountain. They're at the very, very bottom. Nobody who's climbed it already is giving you any grief. They're all recognizing you're doing the work that you have to do. Now, pull this back to the no's. The no's are just Cringe Mountain. Every single day as a salesperson, you've got to climb no mountain. And the other side of no mountain is the valley of yes. And no mountain is pretty tough. And there's like 6 or 7, big crags you got to stop on the way up. But every single day, your job is to climb no mountain to get to the valley of yes. And if you understand that, then it simply recognize it as the job. It's not failure. It's the path to success.
Amazing. I really love that. Cringe Mountain. I'm gonna go and Google that and see what I can find out. You've seen 1 or 2 wild sales pitches around the globe. What's the weirdest one that's actually worked?
Most of the weird ones for me that have worked have been people trying to get a job with us. But I guess it's still a sell. We had one guy deliver a cooler box with ice on it and an arm and a leg. And he put it on there and it was covered with blood. He made fake blood and he cut up his jeans and his arm. And then when you opened it up, it said, "Hey, Rich, I'd give an arm and a leg to work for you." And I was like, that's going to get you an interview. Like that gets you the interview and you got the job. And then another guy he built, when this was way back when, his name's Dino, he actually worked for me twice. He built tile by tile a mosaic QR code. Before QR codes were used, it was right at early days. And he mounted it and he said to missing link, and it was done like a little piece of art. And he had to scan it. And then it was a video of him saying, "I made this for you. This is the effort I make on presentation. I want to come and see you." And he got the job as well. Finding interesting ways to make yourself known, to be memorable, can never hurt.
Oh, I love that. Now, I just want to get back to you as a man. You've gone from the hustle culture, you've gone to writing books, you're helping people present, you've gone from on the stage to off the stage. You've also spoken very openly about this culture of, manful manliness, which is open and vulnerable, but strong and standing for a family, for our role as husbands and fathers and all the rest. How do you talk to modern leaders about motivating without burning out? So chasing the number is good, but chasing life is gooder. Where do you go on that?
I don't think I do. I don't think that's the hill that I want to die on with modern leaders. I do believe when you're young, work till your eyes bleed, right? What people aren't telling you is that your give a shit tank empties. Your delusional self-belief runs out. That's the hardest thing. The reason, if you're a 20-year-old and you listen to me, a 25-year-old, and you're listening to me wondering why these 45-year-olds are possibly tapping out when they have all of this knowledge plus availability to tools, if you're rolling your eyes, what you don't realize is the delusional self-belief that you have as a 25-year-old expires. And when you're 45, it's hard to reach into that pool of confidence, becomes more and more difficult, which is so counterintuitive. So I do recognize we've got to stick to it as much as possible. I
Feel
also
it.
do think, I don't necessarily think business leaders, I think business leaders must have empathy, but they must have empathy for the organization, not the individual. This is a very unpopular opinion, but the job of a business leader is to save the business. And sometimes saving the business means making hard choices for the individuals. Now, if you do not make a hard choice that affects a percentage of your individuals, you may not have a business yet and it may present all of them. And we keep on telling leaders to have this empathetic view, and I think it's fundamentally wrong. I can't feel everything my employees feel. I can have sympathy and I can have compassion. But if I have to lead, leadership is hard. Leadership is about making tough decisions. Leadership is not friendship, right? Business is not family. It's one of the things I I do not like the term when people say it's family. The bottom line is, if my son steals something from me, I'll forgive him and we'll be fine forever. If a staff member steals something for me, we're probably done. Right? If I go to prison, my son will come and visit me, my daughter will come and visit me, but my staff probably won't. I don't know. The point is that it's not the same thing, right? And we need to understand that. Just to the manliness thing, which is slightly different, right? Because you can have leaders who are making tough decisions that are not men. I think I have a traditional view of, I think that we've got to redefine masculinity without losing it. And I think that we've not figured out how that looks yet. So there was a recognition that some aspects of masculinity held women to a certain role. There's two side effects of the change of that. Is the demasculation of men, which is not a good thing. We need strong men. And women need strong men. Women want strong, supportive men in their life. Right? They just don't want assholes. The second thing is the feeling of women who do not want to step into traditionally masculine roles. They're now led to be feeling like they're lesser. And this is a fundamentally problem. So people who are in a traditional relationship, maybe where the husband goes and works and the wife stays at home and looks after the kids, that woman is, for some reason, society is belittling that woman for choosing that. And I think that is so fundamentally flawed. Let me explain to you how I think the world used to be. There used to be two jobs, and one job was an important job and one job was a less important job. The one job required precision and the other job required brute force. The precision job was raising and keeping the children alive, right? When we were cavemen, keeping the children alive, that was a really, really tough job. Knowing exactly what to feed them, all the herbs and things and stuff, very important job. We gave it to the woman. Attention to detail. The guys, we handed rocks and sticks and said, go club animals. And they went and they did the brute force work. And then what happened is the guys would bring that back, and in the end time, the ladies have made potions and they've kept the kids alive and they put them to sleep and they've done everything and the species survives, right? At some point, what happened is I realized, Daniel, that you're better at making spears, and you realize, or arrows, and you realize I'm better at shooting them. So we start doing a little bit of trade where I say, I'll tell you what, you make my arrows, I'll slay your wildebeest. And then what happened is then all of a sudden I'm able to do that so much that we actually have more wildebeest than we need. So then we're able to go to a third person and trade something else for it. And we're able to make margin off effort. This changed everything. So making margin off effort. Before there was no margin. There was just, I do something and I get the outcome of that thing. As that margin grew, then what happened is male role were able to actually do more fun things with it. And the perception of the male role became higher because there was always more margin in that aspect of things. So then what happened is we industrialized that. And we used that power dynamic to industrialize it. And this was the birth of capitalism. Capitalism is, of course, what separated us from feudalism. So that wasn't net good. Before it was just kings and queens and everybody below them. Then it became a chance that anybody had a chance. This was a good thing. This was the liberal point of view, was to be a capitalist. But then, of course, we now got to the point where certain groups are marginalized, one of which was women. And there wasn't that they were marginalized, it's just that they were stuck doing a job that was no longer deemed to be the most important job. Now, at some point then, women said, hey, we want the important job as well. We also want to create margin. Fair enough. I absolutely agree. Now we have two people working. Now we've built an economy where two people have to work. That's really what we've done. So that's really hectic. And now what happens is we now have to pay cheap labor to look after our children. And I'm wondering if we've got the entire continuum wrong. The most important work is now being outsourced to a worker. And what bothers me is not that. If you want to do that, that's up to you. I'm not belittling anyone on their choices. What I am belittling is anybody who judges the woman who chooses to stay at home and build a family. That was the job. That is still job number one. And the male who wants to step up to the role of being a masculine leader for his family in a traditional role, just because it's traditional doesn't make it incorrect. And it's just that mindset I want to get rid of. And I do believe that ultimately some degree of gender roles will come back into play because we can't fight with biology forever.
Wow, that is a podcast on its own. And I thank you for giving us an insight into yourself, Richard. Who would you have dinner with, past or present, and what would you be asking for? What would you be looking for to listen to?
I want it to be myself. I want it to be Barack Obama, who delivered my favorite political speech of all time. One of my favorite modern speeches of all time at the 2004 Democratic Convention. It was just a rhetorical masterpiece. And then I want to invite J.D. Vance. I loved his book, The Hillbilly Elegy. I think he's an absolutely incredible master of rhetoric. And while I understand that he has a job to play with, he works with a very egocentric leader. His boss must always look like the best, and he has to be very, very careful what he says and what he does, or else he'll lose relevance there. I actually do believe that I would be completely uninterested, even recognizing any good that Trump has done. I just don't like him as a person, so I wouldn't want to have him. But I would love to have dinner with J.D. Vance and Barack Obama at the same time. The common ground would be the speeches that they have delivered, the journey they've come, because both of them came from relatively humble beginnings to where they've got. And I want to chat to them about the speeches they gave that made them and how important they were and what the impact of them was. If I could do a dream podcast, Daniel, and we're kind of trying to get it underway, my dream podcast I would host would be called like, the speech that made them, or the talk before the rise, and it would be chatting to Brene Brown about her talk, or Simon Sinek about his talk, the talks that made the people, and to understand the rise from there. And I would love to have Barack Obama and JD Vance on that.
That is so off what I thought you were going to answer. Barack Obama I had. JD Vance I didn't know was even on your radar. So thank you. I'm going to make a point of going and
I love that. I read his book.
Wow.
I've watched a lot of his speeches. He's a brilliant orator. And again, if I could say that, because it's an important point. When you recognize what your craft is, there are people that you like that are experts of your craft, and there are people that you dislike that are experts at your craft. It is very important when you recognize what your craft is that you consume not just the people you like, but actually, if you're studying your craft, you have to consume everybody who uses your craft well. It was why a lot of original orators looked at people like Hitler. In lighting design, he controlled lights to try and make himself look bigger at key times. He had a lighting designer who grew the shadows. Now, I will do nothing to ever glorify any aspect of that vile man, but we must learn the maniacs out there in the world who win are utilizing human persuasion tools that the rest of us need to learn from. So it's very, very important that we don't ignore people at our peril.
Sure. Oh, you challenged me so much, Mr. Mulholland. I love that. I get into an echo chamber and I don't like listening to people like that just because they're good at what we do and I get irritated. It's one of the reasons like I don't like listening to Simon Sinek because I know he's good, but everybody likes listening to him. So I don't like listening to him. I prefer.
I
Anyway,
disagree with him a lot, and I listen to him to disagree. I respect him. I recognize that he's really, really good at the storytelling aspect. So I often disagree with his content, but almost never disagree with his delivery. As a consumer of information, I want to watch him for his content, but as a student of the craft and art of public speaking and rhetoric, I want to watch him for his craft. And so we must be able to separate why we're watching anything we're watching. Is this for leisure or is this for education? And in which case we got to we got to open the rails slightly so we let in more people.
oh, that is such wisdom. Thank you. Rich, I got two more questions for you. I've had good time with you, so thank you for that. You've released a new book now. Tell us what it's about. Tell us where people can get it. Our folks in the UK and the US, especially, I think, Amazon.
Yeah, so the book is called Relentless Relevance: How to Be a Threat to the Future Before the Future is a Threat to You. It's not as sales focused at all as Here Be Dragons was. Here Be Dragons was about telling people stories or selling people new stories about themselves in which they need you. Relentless Relevance is about making yourself needed, about how do I make myself appropriate to the matter at hand? How do I make sure that I get fired last? How do I make sure that I'm the last one standing and having fun doing it? And I try and share the mindsets with people on that. Now it's currently available in audio form on Spotify, Google Books, Apple Books. We're waiting for it to come live. It'll probably be live by the time this comes out on Audible. It's available on Amazon. You can get the print copy and the Kindle version there. And of course, in South Africa, you can get it on Takealot or Exclusives or anywhere we need a book.
Awesome. And you do an amazing program called Onto Stage, the Speaker to Stage.
Story to Stage is our professional speaking training mentorship program. And so what the job is, if you aspire to be a professional speaker, or what we refer to it as a stage marketer, somebody who promotes their business from the stage, and it's a very important skill going forward because videos can be faked. This podcast could be faked. Everything could be faked. The one thing that cannot be faked is being on stage as yourself. The other thing is there's very, very little times where you get 45 minutes of attention and assumed authority. So you get authority, attention, and authenticity when you're good on stage. And we built a program to try and help people become better at that. So it's a cohort program that has tutorials and things. You have to do a discovery call with me, and then we go through it. And then if we accept you, we put you on the program. And there's multi-mediums and ways you go through it. It's a 3-month, 12-week course, and and a community after that to try and get really, really help speakers level up.
And we can get that on the Missing Link website as well.
Yeah, if you go to Missing Link Academy section, you'll find that. But if you go to storytostage.co, you'll find it. But you can just go to ineedmissinglink.com and you'll get it there. And then just because we're talking about this for any of the AI stuff, you could check out toomanyrobots.wtf as well.
I love that as well. That's such a good offering. And then my last one is, if people want you in the UK, the US, how do people get you onto the stage? Where do they contact Rich Mulholland?
If you go to my personal page, the short URL for that is getrich.af. If you go to getrich.af, it'll take you to richmulholland.com. There's a place there where you can send a booking link and an inquiry. They'll come through to me and then we'll jump on a call. I've this year been in all over Europe, South Africa, off to the US now, Canada. So I'm certainly be able to find some time to interrupt. And I got an inquiry this morning from another South Asia tour. So we'll certainly be able to find sometime when I'm traveling that we'll be able to maybe get an event in your area.
Then my ultimate question for you, Richard, what is the 1% the one thing, habit, or tool that sets you apart from other leaders, that just gives you an edge?
Ruthless, ruthless curiosity. My wife says it's a character flaw. She says that I'm unable to not be inputting. I have no ability to not be filling my brain with stuff. So I'm always trying, I'm always learning, and I'm always curious. I am one of the most curious people I know, and I'm constantly trying to synthesize what I'm learning in interesting ways. I think curiosity is the most important superpower to have going forward. If you're not a curious person, try find it. Find something to be curious about, or find lots of things to be curious about. That makes it a bit easier. But it sounds like an oversimplification, but it's really not. The skill for the future is curiosity.
Thank you. That is it. So no matter where you are listening from or what you're doing, to be relentlessly relevant, as Richard says, you've got to be curious. You've got to be curious about how things work, how we operate, and especially in the world of sales, we have to be curious about the problems that we're solving. How did they come to our customers? Richard Mulholland, thank you very much. The Isle of Man, what a place to be calling from. I hope you enjoy the TT this year. It's another dream of mine to go. Maybe I'll visit you for a cup of coffee one day. From me, Daniel, heartfelt thanks to you, Rich Mulholland, and the Missing Link team for giving us some time.
My pleasure. Thanks to you, and thanks to everybody who's still listening. Amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Because Growth Matters. If you got value from today's conversation, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars on your listening platform and share it with someone who might benefit as well. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch you next week.